Daf Yomi Tractate Sanhedrin, page 59b, top of the page, with the words V'harei milah. Shenemra levnei Noach dichtiv v'ata et briti tishmor v'nishnet b'Sinai b'yom hashmini imol. The Gemara asks, but isn't there the mitzvah of circumcision, which was stated with regard to the descendants of Noah, meaning Abraham and his descendants, who had the status of descendants of Noah at that time, as it is written that God said to Abraham with regard to the mitzvah of circumcision, and as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you, throughout their generations, Genesis 17:9. And it was repeated at Sinai for the Jewish people, and on the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised, Leviticus 12:3. And nevertheless, it was stated for the Jewish people alone, and not for the descendants of Noah. The Gemara answers, that verse stated at Sinai is not necessary for the mitzvah itself, but rather it comes to permit circumcision on Shabbat. It is derived from the phrase on the 8th day that circumcision must always be performed on the 8th day. And this is the halacha even if it falls on Shabbat. Therefore, the mitzvah is not considered to have been repeated at Mount Sinai. The Gemara asks, but isn't there the mitzvah of procreation, which was stated with regard to the descendants of Noah, as it is written, and you be fruitful and multiply, swarm in the land and multiply in it, Genesis 9:7, and it was repeated at Sinai in the verse, go say to them, return to your tents, Deuteronomy 5:26. When the Jewish men were commanded to resume conjugal relations with their wives after having been commanded to separate from them in preparation for the giving of the Torah. Nevertheless, the mitzvah of procreation was stated for the Jewish people and not for the descendants of Noah. So the Gemara answers, that verse stated at Sinai is not necessary for the mitzvah itself, but rather it comes to teach another halacha, that any matter that was prohibited by official vote of the Sanhedrin requires another vote to permit it. Even if a rabbinic prohibition is no longer relevant, it is not automatically cancelled, but rather a special ruling is required to cancel it. This is derived from the fact that it was necessary for God to issue a declaration in Deuteronomy 5:26, specifically cancelling the prohibition that had been issued before the giving of the Torah. The Gemara asks, if so, let us say with regard to each and every one of the 7 Noachide mitzvot that it was repeated because of an additional matter the Torah teaches. And the descendants of Noah are exempt from them all. Hachikamar Azara Midar Ubisniba Lamali. The Gemara answers that this is what Rabbi Yossi, the son of Bechanina, is saying. After stating a prohibition with regard to the descendants of Noah, why do we need the Torah then repeat the prohibition itself for the Jewish people? If the only purpose is to teach an additional halacha, it is unnecessary to repeat it in the form of a prohibition. For example, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery. Mamish, this week's parsha, right here. Exodus 20:13. Therefore, it is derived from the fact that the entire prohibition is repeated and not just the new details. That it applies both to Jews and to descendants of Noah. Ve'ein lanu ela yid hanashe bilvad v'alibid Rabbi Yehuda. It is stated in the Braita, And we have only the prohibition against eating the sciatic nerve to which this classification applies, and this is according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara asks, but these aforementioned mitzvot, also procreation and circumcision, were not repeated at Sinai in order to teach that they apply to the descendants of Noah as well as to the Jewish people, but rather were mentioned for other purposes, and therefore they apply only to the Jewish people, similar to the prohibition against eating the sciatic nerve. The Gemara answers, these mitzvot were repeated for the sake of teaching some other matter. By contrast, this prohibition of eating the sciatic nerve was not repeated at all. It is mentioned only in Genesis. Therefore, circumcision and procreation are not included in the category of mitzvot that were given to the descendants of Noah and were not repeated at Sinai. Milsa mikar Abraham hu dika Mahazar le Rachmana Ve'ata es berisi tishmor Ata V'zaracha acharecha ledoiroisom Ata v'zarecha Inish acharini lo. If you wish, say that there is another explanation for the fact that the mitzvah of circumcision does not apply to the descendants of Noah, despite the fact that it was repeated for the Jewish people. From the outset it was Abraham, and not all the descendants of Noah, that the merciful one commanded to perform this mitzvah, as he had said to him, and as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you, throughout their generations. Genesis 17:9. The Gemara infers you and your offspring, yes, another person, no. That's an important gematria. Let's see what it is. 878. Okay. The Gemara challenges, if that is so, the descendants of Ishmael should also be obligated to observe circumcision, as they are also the offspring of Abraham. The Gemara explains, the verse states, for through Isaac, offspring shall be called yours, Genesis 21:12, which means that Ishmael's descendants are not called the offspring of Abraham. B'nei Ishmael chayvo b'Yitzchak v'lo kol Yitzchak. The Gemara challenges, granted Ishmael's descendants are not considered the offspring of Abraham, but at least the descendants of Esau, Isaac's son, should be obligated to observe circumcision. The Gemara explains, since the term through Isaac also means of Isaac, it is derived that the mitzvah applies only to some of Isaac's offspring, but not all the descendants of Isaac. This serves to exclude the descendants of Esau. Yehoshua. B'nei ketur lechayv, Amar Rav Yossi Baravin, Yitiv Reis B'chanina, Es Berisi Hafer, L'Rabo Es B'nei Ketura. Rav Oshia objects to this. If that is so, the sense of Keturah, Abraham's second wife should not be obligated to observe circumcision. The Gemara answers, Rav Yossi Baravin says, and some say that it is Rav Yossi B'chanina who says that the verse, and the uncircumcised male who is uncircumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that soul shall be cut off from his people, he has broken my covenant. Genesis 17:14 is stated to include the descendants of Keturah in the obligation to observe circumcision. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, Adam Rishon lo Yehud lo Basar lechilo. Dichsiv lachem yeh lachla ulechol chayas haaretz, v'lo chayas aretz lachem. The Rav Yehuda says, the Rav says, meat was not permitted to Adam, the first man, for consumption, as it is written. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb that brings forth seed, which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree, in which is the fruit of a tree that gives forth seed. And that's not actually the Gemara, but that was just this edition that's giving us the whole set of verses, not just the the part of it that the Gemara brings. So that being said, for you it shall be for food, and for every animal of the earth, and for every fowl of the air, and for everything that creeps on the earth in which there is a living soul, every green herb for food. And it was so. Genesis 1:19 and 20. It is derived, God told Adam, eating vegetation is permitted to people and animals, but eating animals, the animals of the earth, is not permitted to you. But when the children of Noah came, God permitted them to eat meat. As it is stated, every moving thing that lives shall be for food for you. As the green herb I have given you all. Genesis 9:3. One might have thought that accordingly, even the prohibition against eating a limb from a living animal does not apply to the sons of Noah. Therefore, the two verses, only flesh with its life, which is its blood, you shall not eat. Genesis 9:4. One might have thought that the prohibition against eating an herb from eating a limb from a living animal applies even to creeping animals. Therefore, the verse states only, a term used for exclusion, indicating that creeping animals are not included. Umay Talmuda Amar Rav Huna Damo Misha Damo Chaluk Mibsaro Yatsu Shotzim She'ein Damam Chaluk Mibsaram. The Gemara asks, and what is the derivation? What is the proof that it is creeping animals that are excluded from this prohibition and not other type of animals? Rav Huna says the term blood indicates that the prohibition pertains to the animals whose blood is halachically considered separate from their flesh. This excludes creeping animals whose blood is not considered separate from their flesh. The Gemara raises an objection to the assertion that eating meat was prohibited by Adam. From the verse end, have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that creeps on the land. Genesis 1:28. What? Is it not stated with regard to consumption? Meaning, doesn't this verse mean that people may eat the meat of animals? The Gemara answers no. The verse is referring to using of animals for labor. V'dagim b'nei malachaninu in kede rachava debai rachava. The Gemara asks, but are fish capable of performing labor? The Gemara asks, yes, they are. They are capable in accordance with the statement of Rachava, as Rachava asked the following question: if one drove a wagon to which a goat and a shibuta, fish that were harnessed together, was the halacha, he has violated a prohibition of diverse kinds in the same way that one does when plowing an ox and donkey together. In any event, Rachava's question indicates that there is a way, albeit far-fetched, for a fish to perform labor. Tashima v'of hashamayim v'of hashamayim ma'elav l'chila. Our fish I remember this from Bava Metzia. A man drove a wagon with a goat and a shibuta on the other. A fish and a goat. Wow. Okay. Tashima, coming here, prove that that's permitted for him to eat meat from the phrase in the aforementioned verse and have dominion over the fowl of the air. Is it not stated with regard to consumption? The Gemara answers no. It is referring to labor. The ofos b'nei malachinu in K'debay Rabba bar Rav Huna Dash Avazin. And the Gemara asks, but are different birds capable of performing labor? The Gemara answers, yes, they are. As Rabba Bar Rav Huna raises a dilemma: if one threshed with geese and chickens, what is the halacha? According to the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, the son of Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, the son of Yehuda, derives from the verse, "You shall not muzzle an ox when it treads," Deuteronomy 25:4, and a laborer in the field is entitled to eat from the produce during his work, only if his work involves both his hands and his feet, like an ox which treads with its forelegs as well as its hind legs. Rabba Bar Huna raises a dilemma as to whether the prohibition against muzzling an animal while it is being used for labor in the field applies to geese and chickens, which have only 2 feet. In any event, it is indicated that birds can perform labor. Tashima, come in your proof, my boy. So, right. Coming here, proof from the phrase that have dominion over every living thing that creeps upon the land. Creeping animals certainly cannot be used for labor. Apparently, the verse is referring to eating them. The Gemara answers, that phrase comes to include the snake, which was capable of performing labor when it was created. The Tanya Rishon Benas Yoimer, Chaval Shemesh Gadol Shavim Ben Oilam, She'il Malal Eskav Nachash Kol Echad Yisrael Hayum Mizdam Lo Shnei נחשים טובים, אחד משגרו לצפון ואחד משגרו לדרום, להביא לו סנדלבונים טובים ואבנים טובות ומרגוליות, ולא עוד אלא שמפשילין רצועה תחת ולבוא מוציא באפר לנגינתו ולכלתו. As it is taught in a Braita that Rabban Shimon ben Menashe says, woe over a great attendant who has been lost to the world, as had the snake not been cursed, and that it should go on its belly. There had been 2 fine snakes at the disposal of each and every one of the Jewish people. One he would send forth to the north, the other he would send to the south, to bring him precious sandal bonim, type of precious stone, and other precious stones and pearls. Moreover, he would attach a strap under his snake's tail, like a harness to an animal, and he would use it to take dirt out to his garden and to rebuild his ruin, as he does with other animals. This demonstrates that the snake was capable of performing labor. Meisvei Rabbi Yehuda ben Temoimer Admarishin Meisv began Edin Hayam Ve'yu Malachim Asharis Tzolin Lo Basar ובסנין לא יין, הציץ לו בנחש ורע בכבודוי, נזכר בוי בבשר היורד מן השמיים. The Gemara raises an objection from a Braita to the assertion that eating meat was prohibited to Adam. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema would say, Adam, the first man, would dine in the Garden of Eden, and the ministering angels would roast meat for him and strain wine for him. The Gemara glanced at him and saw his glory and was jealous of him, and for that reason the snake incited him to sin and caused his banishment from the garden. According to this, evidently Adam would eat meat. The Gemara answers, there is the reference to meat that descended from heaven, which was created by a miracle, and was not the meat of animals at all. In Kihad Reb Shimon ben Chalafta Havikazel Beorta Bagube Hanach Arvaita De Hahu Kanami Lape Amar Hakavirim Progim Teref Nechito Le Tatitama He Achada Achalu Vechada Shavku Esvei Veota. Sorry. Shviku Asi Bemidarashi by Ale Davar Tame Hu Ze O Diber Tahor Amar Lahem Ein Davar Tame Yor Ben Shemayim. The Gemara asks, how is there such a thing that meat? Is there such a thing that meat descends from heaven? The Gemara answers, yes. It's like this incident. Rabbi Shimon Chalafta was walking along the way. He encountered those lions that were roaring at him, intending to eat him. He said the young lions roar after their prey and seek their food from God. Psalms 104:21. And they deserve to receive food. 2 thighs of an animal descended from heaven for him. The lions ate one of those thighs, and they left the other one. He took it and entered the study hall, inquired about it. Was this thigh kosher? Kosher item or not kosher item? The sage says, certainly it is kosher, and as a kosher item does not descend from heaven. By Minero Zera Bahu Yordel de Musa Chamor Ma Amar Le Yarud Nera Ha Amri Le O Davar Tamayar Mishamayim. In connection to that story, just realize that Rabbi Zera asked Rabbi Bahu, if the lightness of a donkey had descended for him, what would the halacha have been? What would it have been permitted? Rabbi Bahu said to him, foolish bird. The sages already said to him that a non-kosher item does not descend from heaven, therefore it must be kosher. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Af al Akishuf my time about Yehuda Ksiv. In the Braita that lists the Noachide mitzvah in 56a, it is stated that Rabbi Shimon says that the descendants of Noah were also commanded concerning the prohibition against engaging in sorcery. The Gemara asks, what is the reasoning behind the opinion of Rabbi Shimon? The Gemara answers, as is written, and that's where this article stops here. That's pretty much where I got to, but you got the gist of it, I think. All right, until next time.